Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Today, I'll be chatting with Alex Lopez. Alex is focused on wine and spirits education while keeping accessibility as key. His Instagram, @drinkswithalexlopez, is one of my favorite pages for learning more about wine and spirits. He shares small bits of information in a really approachable way and has a great sense of humor to go with it. I find that key with people I like to learn from. In addition to certifications from the WSET, Society of Wine Educators, and Wine Scholar Guild, he has recently completed an MBA in Wine and Spirits Business from the Burgundy, Burgundy, School of Business in Dijon. He has also taken the Bourgogne Master Scholar exam, which is why he is the perfect person to give us a deep dive into the French region of Burgundy. I'll be asking him about his career, how he got to where he is today, and what he plans to do in the future, along with learning a little bit more about Burgundy along the way. This is going to be a lot of fun. So, without further ado, let's get into the interview. Thanks for joining me for this. I'm looking forward to learning more about you, first of all, and your love of wine, and then to deep dive a little bit into Burgundy.
Yeah, I'm super excited. It's going to be so much fun.
Cool. Okay, well, I'm thinking of doing this in two parts. So we're going to start one, as I have in my notes. I'm like, part one, about Alex, and then part two, we'll do a little bit of that Burgundy deep dive. So first, about you, let's just start. I gave a little intro in the beginning, but I want to give you a chance to intro yourself. So tell me a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Alex Lopez, and I am the wine director for a fine wine and spirits store here in Greenville, South Carolina. I just finished my MBA in wine and spirits management at the Burgundy School of Business in Dijon, and have been studying wine pretty intensively since 2019.
Cool. And now, we know where you're at now, but I always have to ask, what was it that originally sparked your interest in wine? How did you fall in love with this?
So I have been a little wine nerd since I was 14 years old.
Really?
Yep. I bought my first copy of the World Wine Atlas when I was 14 because we were learning about the Abbey of Cluny in our history class. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to learn everything there is about wine because it's so tied to history and all of that. But I didn't get into wine full time as my career until after getting literally hit by a truck.
Okay.
So basically, I was riding my bike to work one day and I got clipped by a pickup truck while riding my bicycle. And for the next 4 years, basically, on and off, I was dealing with chronic pain. I was dealing with numerous surgeries and I couldn't work. So I was fortunate enough to find a doctor who was able to put me back together. And when everything was all fixed up, my wife, Catherine, came up to me and she said, all right, you've literally just gotten your life back and you've been studying wine. So why don't we just make this your full-time career?
She's the smart one, isn't she?
She is. She knows what's up.
Oh, wow. So, okay, sounds like maybe history nerd in school. That was kind of your thing, and wine was attached to that. There was like this idea of you could learn more about the history. I'm so cute. Like at 14 to be like, I want to learn about wine.
Yep. I knew where I wanted to go to college when I was in 5th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't even know when I was 18 where I wanted to go to college or what I wanted to do, to be honest.
So I studied history at Gettysburg College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
That makes sense. All right. We're going to skip forward a little bit. So like you said, you ended up getting your MBA in Burgundy. And am I right in saying you've taken the Bourgogne Master Scholar exam?
I took it on Sunday.
Ah, it's crazy. Okay, I'm curious why Burgundy? Is there a particular reason you focused on this region?
Well, it goes back to the history. It's one of the longest historical wine regions outside of like Italy and Greece. And I love the fact that it's so simple in terms of just having two grapes, but so complex because it's how those two grapes are really expressed is the essence of what Burgundy is. So it's something that you can spend your entire career just focusing in on.
It's so true, that juxtaposition. Yeah, Burgundy is like, it's simple. It's just Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. And then you take one more step into Burgundy and you're like, it is not simple in the slightest.
I mean, what is it? 1/5 of all French appellations are in Burgundy.
I'd believe it. That makes sense. Okay, we're gonna dive into more of Burgundy. Before we do that, I have one last question on your journey and your experience in wine here. And I usually say it for the end, but again, we're gonna do Burgundy at the end. So, what's next for you? What's next on the horizon?
So my company, we now have a bank account and all that fancy stuff. So Drinks with Alex Lopez is fully incorporated and can get paid, which is really fun.
Exciting.
I will be taking on a number of roles in the fine dining scene here in Greenville, South Carolina, as a professional wine educator.
Ooh.
So where you have a lot of restaurants have their floor sommelier or their beverage director, I'm going to be coming in and doing special events where we do very focused single region dining experiences for guests and kind of ramp that up into something special.
Well, that's cool. So, have you had restaurant experience in the past, or is this kind of your first foray into the restaurant world?
Oh, I grew up in a hotel. My dad was the general manager of a hotel in Wyoming. So I have
Ah,
restaurant experience, I have hotel experience, I have ski area experience. I've got it all.
cool. Oh, that's gonna be so fun. Will these be like, is the goal for these to be towards any type of audience? Are we looking for wine experts, wine newbies, or anything in between?
So it's really kind of open-ended. I just did a French wine only pairing dinner with one of the restaurants here in Greenville last week. And that was just like French 101. But we are also working with one of the fanciest restaurants in Greenville to do a Grand Cru only dinner. So
All
pairing
right.
every single plate with a different Grand Cru. And we're hoping to be doing a Faveli Grand Cru wines. So Mazie Chambertin, Corton, and maybe a Montrachet. They're going to see what they can do.
Wow. What a cool experience.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Well, I definitely know that I'll have to be visiting Greenville sometime before you leave this job or to move on to the next thing in your career because these wine dinners sound amazing.
Oh, well, we are based in Greenville, and Greenville is probably going to be home base for the next couple of years.
Okay, okay, good to know. Okay, so now we're gonna dive into Burgundy, and as always, I always like to start with the history, I think, and this is perfect since you're very into the history. So could you give us like a brief history of Burgundy? I know it's a big ask.
So, Burgundy, the first production of grapes is in the first century in Gevrey-Chambertin. They found a vineyard that was planted by the Romans. It was kind of the heartland of the last Gallic holdouts against Roman occupation, the Battle of Elysium, where Julius Caesar finished his conquest of Gaul, happened about 25 miles from Dijon. And then for most of French history, it was a quasi independent state. So under the Valois dynasty, the third son of the Valois king became Duke of Burgundy and made it an independent state. And then there were the four dukes of Burgundy who ruled over it and really created this very, very cosmopolitan nation, essentially, for about 300 years.
Wow, and when was this? What were those 300 years?
So 1378 to the beginning of the 1600s.
Okay.
And so you have these four major dukes really changed the way that Burgundy wine was made. So Philip the Bold, especially the first duke, he came in to Burgundy after the time when the Black Death had swept through, and a lot of the vineyards were changing. So he was came in and he banned Gamay in
Ah,
1395 and
okay.
really kind of set up that Pinot Noir was going to be the grape that defined Burgundy. And then he married his son, Charles, to a Dutch duchess. And that is why you have there's a very famous beer called Duchess of Burgonia. That's a Belgian beer. And that's
Ah,
because of this tie between Belgium, the Netherlands, and Burgundy. In fact, the whole original constitution of the Netherlands, so the very first kind of constitutional structure that we have in the Netherlands, comes because of Burgundians.
wow.
And then half of it was reincorporated into France after the death of Philip the Rash, died at the Battle of Nantes. So the Duchy of Burgundy, the core Duchy of Burgundy, so everything west of the Saône River reverted back to France. Everything east of the Saône River became part of the Holy Roman Empire and stayed there until well into the 1700s. After the 30 Years' War was when French Comté was reincorporated back into France. So places like Jura and Savoie became part of it.
Okay.
And so, yeah, Burgundy, lots of history. And
Yes.
you have monks. Monks are the big things in the winemaking history. So you have the Benedictines and Cistercians really kind of are able to plot out all of the vineyards across Burgundy because they're making wine to be shipped to different places. So you have the Grand Cru wines were originally classified as the wines that would go to the Pope's table. The upper slopes were the wines of the cardinals, which we now know as Premier Cru, and then the bishop's wines became the village level.
Wow. Okay, so they made these different levels, and we're going to talk about the different levels. I want to kind of dig into that for those that are newer to Burgundy. But it more had to do with like who they were giving it to. Like they knew the most important people had to get the best wine. And
Yes.
so they had to distinguish each of these pieces and they knew even then, was it purely just like from experiment? Like this wine just ended up tasting the best?
Yep. It was just because this wine tasted the best, or they were figuring out how aspects work. So they knew like you were getting more sun on this area, so better grape production. And they were really very scientific about it.
That is so cool. And
And at this time, we have to also remember that most communion wine prior to the 1500s was actually white wine across Roman Catholicism
huh,
because you didn't have dry cleaners and you still had your white vestments. So
sure.
you were doing like 2 months worth of church services and you couldn't spill any red wine on your white vestments. So white wine was the main communion wine for a long time.
Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. And was it always, so I know you mentioned like when they got rid of Gamay, right? And Gamay is the grape now of Beaujolais, which is just below Burgundy. Was it always then Pinot Noir and Chardonnay essentially after they got rid of the Gamay?
Yep. I mean, there's still places where they grow Gamay in so the town of Gamay is actually in the Cote de Beaune,
Okay.
and the town of Chardonnay is in the Mâconnais.
I was say I knew about Chardonnay. I did not know about the town of Gamay. Okay, so we've started to dig into a little bit of the grapes, right? I shared on a previous episode, French 101, about Pinot Noir and Chardonnays, where, is what you'll find in Burgundy. But right, that's just the beginning. We know that French wine is best understood by learning about the regions. So can you tell us a little bit about, you've mentioned a couple of them, the Mâconnais, but can you tell us about the different regions in Burgundy and, kind of the basics of how do they differ in terms of the wines they make and the terroir that they have?
So basically, we think about Burgundy as the main stretch is this long escarpment called the Côte d'Or, or the Golden Coast. And that extends downwards. So you have the Cote de Nuit in the north, which is Pinot Noir dominated, about 97% Pinot Noir in the Cote de Nuit. Then you get down to the Cote de Beaune, and it starts to open up a little bit. So you see a little bit more Chardonnay. This is where you see your famous Chardonnay Grand Crus coming in. We'll talk about those in a bit. Then you go down into the Côte Chalonnaise, which is a little bit of a different soil typography, a little bit more of an uplift of a different style of limestone. But this is where you can actually find probably your best value driven Burgundian wines. So places like Montagny, Méquery, Rouy, and Givry are all lovely wines. And then Bouzeron is a village level appellation which only produces the grape Aligote.
That's right. There's one other grape you can find. Well, I guess we talked about a little bit of Gamay, but the Aligote, the random one that the other grape you can find in Burgundy.
Yep. And then you go south and you're in pure Chardonnay land in the Mâconnais, which includes places like the Macon Village appellations, and then Pouilly-Fuissé, Pouilly-Vinzel, Pouilly-Locher, Saint-Ferrand, all those kind of stuff are down in the furthest south. And then at that southernmost point, you start to transition into Beaujolais. And a lot of Beaujolais actually was part of Burgundy originally. It's only when they redrew maps that Beaujolais was cut off and put into a different region. So therefore, it's not part of the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region.
So it is no longer, because that's one thing I always get confused on is like, is Beaujolais its own region or is it a part of Burgundy that they just choose not to be like a part of?
It's part of a different French region. So basically in France, you have the country of France, then you have regions, which are kind of like states.
Okay.
And then you have départements, which are kind of like counties.
Ah, okay.
So the wine growing region of Burgundy exists within Bourgogne-Franche-Comté, which is the region, and it's spread across three departments: the Yonne, the Côte d'Or, and the Saône-et-Loire.
Wow. This is why things are confusing, right? Because you're like the Côte d'Or is both one of these, I can't say the one you're saying, but the county region, and it's also a wine region.
Yep.
Yeah, not confusing at all. And what about Chablis?
So Chablis is the northernmost part. It is in the Yonne department. It was actually for the longest time under the historical purview of the Counts of Champagne, because the Seine River, it sits on the right bank of the Seine River, which flows south to north. And that was where the border used to be between Champagne and Burgundy. But then the Burgundians conquered it and it became part of Burgundy. So it's this northernmost exclave. It's totally separate from the contiguous area of the Côte d'Or. But you also have, so you have Chablis, you have Saint-Brie, you have Vézelay, you have all these little tiny village level appellations up there that produce some really stunning wines, including the only Sauvignon Blanc that you can find that is produced in the Burgundian region.
And where that's in which of those regions produces the Sauvignon Blanc?
In Saint-Brie.
Saint Brie. That's new to me. Oh, I feel like I've heard it maybe once or twice before, but it's so hard. So, like, technically, Chablis is part of Burgundy, but it's not necessarily considered like the main Burgundy region.
Well, it's not contiguous with everything else. You can like drive and be
Sure.
in the Burgundian wine region. I mean, if you want to get even more confusing, Pouilly-Fumé is technically part of Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region, but it is part of the Loire Valley wine region.
Right. Great. We needed it more confusing. One other question I had when you were talking about the region. So let's go back to the continuous Burgundy region. So we have the Cote d'Or, is what you said, like in the north, and then it's called the Gold Coast. Do you know why that is?
Depending on which person you're talking to, there are four different definitions. But the two that I like the most are it is golden during the fall when all the leaves change. So it's like driving past this big golden stretch of land. Or it is the Côte d'Orient. So it is the orientation. It is an east facing escarpment. And they just shortened Orient to Or to make it sound like gold.
Oh, sure. All right. I can see that. Okay, so we have the Côte d'Or, and then that's broken down into, remind me again, so it's a Côte de Nuit, which is
Côte de
primarily
Nuit.
Pinot Noir. Côte de
Yeah.
Nuit, that's mostly Pinot Noir. And what was the
Mhm.
other half again?
And then the Cote de Beaune.
Côte de Beaune, that's right. That's the one I'm most familiar with. And there is a city called Beaune, is there not?
Yep. Beaune is the kind of wine-making headquarters city of Burgundy. It is where the BIVB, which is the Bourgogne Wine Board, is based. It is also where the majority of the large negociants are based. So like Louis Jadot, Bouchard, Bichot, all based in Beaune.
Okay. And then so that's the first part. And then it's Dijon in the Côte de Nuit.
Dijon is at the very top of the Côte de Nuit. So the southernmost like suburbs of Dijon are part of Chenov, which is included within the Marcenais appellation, which is the furthest north village.
Okay.
The only winemaking area inside of Dijon city limits proper is called Bourgogne Montcoul, or Burgundy, the Mount of Butts, because it's so steep that all of the farmers, their pants would fall down when they were bending over. So it's literally Mont, Monte, cool, butt, Mount Butt.
Oh, man, I love that they got a good sense of humor, man.
And all the people who produce on Montcool, they all have labels that are just people's butts.
Okay, I'm definitely looking for those wines now. Okay, so that's the Côte d'Or, and then just below that, just I feel like it's nice to just run through it one more time because I feel like it's helpful to kind of picture. Under that was Côte Chalonnais.
Yep.
I haven't found that much in the US, or maybe it just doesn't pop up or people don't label it as such. This podcast is sponsored by Repour Wine Savers. Listen, I love wine, but that doesn't mean I want to drink a full bottle every night. You see, it's always a risk opening a bottle knowing I'll only have a glass or two. But now I don't worry about that at all because I have Repour. These little contraptions will keep your open bottles of wine good for up to 3 months by removing oxygen from the bottle using fancy chemistry. And they're so easy to use. I simply open a bottle of wine, cork or screw cap, just like normal, and enjoy my glass or two. Then, when I'm ready to call it a night, I rip the foil off my Repour wine saver and place it in the bottle in place of the cork or screw cap, and then stick the bottle in the fridge. Simple as that. Then, whenever I grab another glass from that bottle in the future, I just make sure to put the Repour back on as soon as I'm done pouring. It's that easy. Want to give Repour a try? Head to repour.com, repour.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ for 10% off your order. That's Repour, repour.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ. No spaces in that, and the and is spelled out, so it's CORKANDFIZZ. Once you have Repour, you'll never have to worry about opening a bottle of wine just for one glass. I mean, heck, now you can try 2 or more wines at the same time and have your own at-home wine tasting. This podcast is sponsored by the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club. Interested in trying new wines, but not sure where to start? Or maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you love the idea of tasting wine live with me. If that's you, come join my Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club, and you'll get to sip wine with me twice a month while I help you find new favorite wines. The Cork Crew is not your ordinary wine club. This is a community of people who are passionate about exploring new flavors, learning about different wine styles, and having fun along the way. And the best part about this club, purchasing the wine is completely optional. Plus, all events are recorded, and you have access to the full library of recordings as a court crew member. So you can always catch up if you can't make it live. Oh, and did I mention it's virtual, which means you get to do all of this from the comfort of your sofa in your PJs. No need to worry about driving in crappy traffic, finding a designated driver, or spending an arm and a leg on a taxi. Want to give it a try without the commitment? You're in luck. Right now, I'm offering a free class pass to anybody who wants to try out the Court Crew Virtual Wine Tasting Club. With this pass, you'll be able to join a Court Crew event of your choosing. No strings attached. I don't need your credit card. I don't need you to sign up for anything. You'll be my guest. Simply head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your class pass and be one step closer to becoming a member of the best wine tasting club around, the Court Crew. I can't wait to see you there. Now, let's get back to the show.
You have to know the villages.
Okay.
Most buyers are trying to bring in Cote d'Or wines or Mâconnais wines, and the Côte Chardonnay is kind of called the forgotten zone.
Okay.
So you have places like Mercury, which is probably the most common place that you'll find red wine from the Côte Chardonnays. And then Givry, Rouly are super like specific. You have to seek those out actively. Bouzeron, as I mentioned, only Aligote. And then Montagny is all Chardonnay.
Okay. Because you said that was like the best value, and I thought that was interesting because I always associated Mâconnais with the best value, but I suppose that's only like the best value Chardonnay, if anything.
Yeah, the joke that they used to make about the Mâconnais is that it was the bargain basement
Fair enough.
Burgundy because there weren't any Premier Crus there until 2020. So it was like nobody thought that the Mâconnais was serious. A lot of the wine that was produced there was produced by co-ops. So people were like, no, it's not as serious as the rest of Burgundy. But Mâconnais is amazing value wines, and like Pouilly-Fuissé wines are fantastic because you have literally this rock, the Roche de Salut, the Solitude Rock, pops up in the middle of Pouilly-Fuissé, and it's the exact same terroir as the Côte d'Or.
Part of it is maybe, and this is something that we'll talk about too. I'm very curious of like a lot of these classification systems and the things they decided are like very old. And I'm curious how up to date they are, or how much they're just like, okay, we've decided this, so now that's what it is. But before we go into like opinions on it, we've talked a little bit about Grand Cru, Premier Cru, Village. But for those that are new to Burgundy, that might be like, what the heck are you talking about? So there's a fairly strict classification system in Burgundy. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yep. So we have 84 appellations in Burgundy. Each village produces their own wine, or they can produce regional level wine. So you have 44 different villages producing wine in Burgundy, and each of them are producing at what is called the village level. So if you go into a store and you see like Nuit Saint George, that means that it is from the village of Nuit Saint George, village appellated vineyards. But then within that village appellation, you have vineyards that have an especially high prestige. So those are Premier Cru vineyards. And you can have individually labeled Premier Cru vineyards. So like famous one, Chambon-Musigny, Les Amoureux, the lovers. Really gorgeous Pinot Noir, super light and lacy, but it is a single Premier Cru. But then if you own land in a bunch of Premier Crus in a single village, you can put it all together into a big vat, blend it all up, and create a Premier Cru that represents the village as a whole.
Oh, interesting. So it doesn't have to be directly from one vineyard as long as all the vineyards were in that village.
Yep.
Huh. Okay. I did not know that.
And we have about 660 Premier Cru,
Just a few.
just a few. But then above that, you have 33 individual appellations. So individually independent of the whole Burgundian region appellations that are all Grand Crus. And they all have their own rules and their own yields and their own soil types, and they produce their own specific styles of wine. And knowing those is kind of way that you get into Burgundy is like if you want to study Burgundy, start studying the Grand Crus, and that gets you accustomed to how the villages work because you need to know that someplace like Gevry Chambertin has the most Grand Crus. It has 9. But sometimes those Grand Crus have borders that cross over. So, like, if you're growing grapes in Chambertin Clos de Bez, you could label them as Chambertin Clos de Bez on your label as a Grand Cru, or you could call it Chambertin. So it kind of depends on what you want in those situations.
Is Chambertin, is that a Grand Cru as well?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
And then most of the famous villages in Burgundy have the name of their most famous Grand Cru vineyard attached onto the end. So Gevry Chambertin used to be just Gevry until 1878 when they petitioned the king to be like, hey, we think that our wine is super awesome, so we should get the permission to include Chambertin on our name. I was like, okay. And so you also have like Chambol Musigny. Musigny, most famous, Von Romanée, Romanée Conti, or I mean, there's so many Romanés in Von Romanée.
So that's why it's like you see these words and they look familiar and you see them in multiple different areas, but they mean something different because they're essentially taking what was just like the name of the village. And then they're like, yeah, but there's this great Grand Cru vineyard next to us. And it's well known. Let's see if we can basically add that to our name so then more people look at us, kind of.
Yep.
And then just to clarify, the Grand Cru, are they specifically like vineyards or are they larger than a vineyard, each of the Grand Cru regions?
So they can be itty bitty to really big. So La Romanée is a monopole in Von Romanée. It is not only the smallest appellation in Burgundy, it is the smallest single appellation in France. It's about 0.86 hectares, so it's little over an acre.
Okay, wow. And that's decided that that is the best wine versus like the acres surrounding it are not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the acres surrounding it are also like Romani Conti, Romani Saint Vivant. Right across the street, you have La Grande Bru, then you have La Tâche. So you have a bunch of Grand Crus around it.
Oh, so they're all okay. So they're each like it's just like a puzzle work of Grand Crus kind of each around surrounding each other.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you have something like Corton, which is the entire hillside of the Corton Hill, which is one Grand Cru.
So in terms of like the Grand Crus and how they were decided, was it primarily like one, like they made great wine. We already didn't know that from the monks, deciding on that. But after that, was it politics? Was it family? How did these get decided and are they still being made?
It was the monks and then it was politics, and they're not going to be making any more. They're pretty much set. A lot of the people who are producing at top tiers in Premier Crus that are like, well, why don't we just promote like Clos Saint Jacques to make it a Grand Cru? They're like, no, we don't want to be. There's already 9 Grand Crus in Gevry Chambertin. Us producing Gevry Chambertin Clos Saint Jacques, people know that that is like one of the preeminent Premier Crus. So it's like, I would rather be first among this ranking than just mixed in with the everybody else in the Grand Cru setting.
Ah, so nobody really wants more, unless I suppose you have an area that isn't as well known. But even then, you just attach it to a more well known and you just be the best in your category.
Yep. But
Okay.
new Premier Crus are always being debated. Marcinay, in particular, is always petitioning every year to get some Premier Crus included in their appellation because Marcinay actually used to produce the most expensive wine in Burgundy. But when phylloxera hit,
Uh,
everything changed and they switched over to satiating the Dijonnaise cafe culture. So they started making rosé. And that's actually the only appellation in Burgundy that can produce white, red, and rosé at a village level.
Interesting. And that was, say that region again, Marcinay?
Marcinay.
Interesting. Okay. So now talking about all these different, the classifications. So we have like I always think of it like a pyramid, you have the Burgundy level at the very bottom, just anything labeled Bourgogne, Burgundy, then you have the village, which I was going to ask you too. So these are named by the name of the village. Will it ever say village on it anywhere?
No, it'll just say that you just have to know that the village is producing wine.
Okay, and then the Premier Cru and Grand Cru. Now these I've noticed do tend to have like the like Premier Cru will be labeled by the name of the Premier Cru, but it'll also have like one ER Cru written on it,
Yeah.
and then typically Grand Cru. Is that general across the board, or only some of them do that?
Premier Cru, they'll either write it out as Premier or they'll do the one ER. Especially if it's a long name of a Premier Cru, they'll put the one ER, and
Sure.
that's always attached to the village.
Okay.
Grand Cru always just labeled as Chambertin Clos de Bez Grand Cru, Romani Conti Grand Cru.
All right. So at least those are a little easier. So, if it's basically, I'm trying to think like if you're shopping for Burgundy, like obviously ask for help is your best bet. But
Yeah.
if you can't, your next step is if you're looking at the bottle and it's labeled some region or village and it doesn't say anything else, it's village level. Now, if it
Yes,
is says that plus Premier Cru or Grand Cru, right? I'm thinking for all the people who don't want to have to memorize all the different villages and Grand Crus. If it's labeled something plus Premier Cru or Grand Cru, you know that it's that and not village.
absolutely.
Okay, all right, that's something. And then if it's just Burgundy, we know it's just Burgundy. So,
Yeah.
okay, so we're talking about the different classifications. As someone who's spent a lot of time in Burgundy and a lot of time studying this, do you think the Grand Cru wines are worth the hype? Like, are they worth the money? Like, are they actually the best Burgundy that you can get?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So a lot of these Grand Crus, the smaller ones or the ones that are further up on the hillside, tend to be really good. But sometimes you have really big Grand Cru and you can get a lot of variability. Clos de Beaune is probably the easiest example of this. It is the largest Grand Cru in the Cote de Nuit. It's this big, huge walled vineyard that was built by the Cistercians. And it goes all the way from like the middle part of the slope down to the road. And so people kind of are like, well, is roadside wine really at a
Right.
Grand Cru status? Because right across the street is Burgonia regional appellation.
Okay, that's wild.
Yeah, so it's like, so is it really? But then you drink some of these wines and it is an experience. I mean, I got to have, I've had very few Grand Crus, but the Grand Crus that I've had are all amazing wines.
I think the trick is just to learn how to find that regional wine that's across the street from the Grand Crus. Or like I've also heard people call them like baby Grand Crus or baby Premier Cru, where it's like the vineyard next to one of those well-known or one of the Premier Cru or Grand Cru vineyards. Do you think those are like, is that like a good technique as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of vineyards in Burgundy that are labeled that have their own names and have their names legally allowed to be put on a label. So, like Les Aguilés in Chambon-Musigny is just on the back side of the slope from from Musigny. So it's just a little bit of a difference. Or like if you want to drink Montrachet, but you don't have $10,000 laying around,
As most of us
there's a
don't.
whole there's a whole backside of the Montrachet Hill is in the Saint Aubin village appellation, and that's all Premier Cru. And I mean, they're very difficult to find in the United States, but if you find Saint Aubin Premier Cru, it is exquisite and usually like maybe $100.
Oh, wow. What a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of talking about different Burgundy wines. Do you have any tips for buying Burgundy wine? And especially, I am going to kind of center this in the US. And we talked a little bit about reading the label, but kind of attached to that, how to read the label and how to get good Burgundy wine.
So if you want to get into Burgundy and just kind of like learn about drinking it, start with the Maconnais. Really easy. Drink stuff like Pouilly Fussé, Pouilly Vinzel, Pouilly Locher. All of those are going to be super value driven. They're going to be less than $50 for the most part. Then, if you want to start drinking in the Côte d'Or, I recommend going with villages that aren't as well known. So places like Marcenay in the very north, Santenay in the very south of the Côte d'Or are both super amazing villages and produce exquisite wine. Or places like Saint Aubin. You're probably not going to find any Ossi d'Ores in the States, but that's a really cool value village. and then just start working into what type of flavor profiles you want. So my favorite comparison is Pommard and Volnay. These are two red wine producing appellations just south of Beaune. Pommard is like super structural and dense and gets in your face. And then Volnay is like light and floral and really totally different styles of Pinot Noir. So just figure out what you enjoy drinking and find the Premier Crus that are in there, and you can drink so much variability in Premier Cru wines coming from these areas too.
I like the idea of the comparison of like finding, because like we said, it's in Burgundy, it's mostly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay besides those few spots of other grapes. But even just in the two villages, not far apart from each other, they're going to produce a totally different style of Burgundy.
Yeah.
And it's so important to learn, what kind of style you like. And then my tip is always, once you figure that out, find that local wine shop that has a lot of good Burgundy. I know there's one in Seattle for the local listeners. It's University Wines on Sandpoint, and they've got a great Burgundy selection. Then you can start telling, the person that you're buying the wine from, hey, I really like the Pommard between those two, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else? What are the other ones I should try? What direction should I go in? And they're basically kind of your steward through the world of wine. And all you had to do was kind of figure out what you liked.
Yeah. And I hate to say this, but finding a good wine store is definitely important because your average wine distributor network doesn't sell Burgundy actively.
Oh,
So
interesting.
in the last 6 months of working at my current job, I think I've brought in 20, 25 different Burgundies on closeout deal from my distributors.
Really? Are people just not drinking Burgundy as much?
No, it's not that people aren't drinking Burgundy. It's that the distributor doesn't have the network to sell like all these Premier Crus. So I see it on the closeout list. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to buy 3 cases of Premier Cru Beaune for $35 a bottle wholesale.
What? Oh my gosh. Dang, yeah. All right. Find that wine shop. Get them bringing in the wines. And okay, so the next question I'm asking, I didn't have it on the list I sent over to you, but I'm actually planning to visit Burgundy in the fall. And so I'm curious if you have any tips for people traveling to Burgundy, how to make the most of the experience.
Hire a tour company and send your emails to negociants like 3 months before you go.
Okay. And tell me again, negociants. I'm learning more about them, but what are negociants?
So negociants basically came about after the Napoleonic Code of Inheritance. So all these families, which are all farming families, they had big plots of land, but then they had to start doing equal inheritance amongst all their family members. So you get subdivisions and subdivisions and subdivisions and subdivisions, and they're not able to produce a full yield of wine. So they started selling their grapes to larger corporations, basically.
Okay. And these negociants basically, because they make wine, or are they given the grape juice or the wine or both?
Now they're given the grapes more often,
Oh, okay.
but they used to buy must or already fermented wine.
Okay, but now they're more so actually buying the grapes and making the wine themselves.
Yeah. So the best places that you can get into, because Burgundians are very nice, but they are inhospitable in terms of giving tours. Do not expect to go to Burgundy and go into like a tasting room like you do in Napa or anywhere in the United States because they don't care. They sell 100% of their wine every year. They don't need you coming in and becoming part of their wine club.
Sure. They're not working for you.
Yeah, so that's the best advice that I can give just having lived there
Yeah.
because we sent like thousands of emails to producers just being like, can we just like we're students in a master's program in Burgundy, like we would love to come. They're like, no, we don't care.
Wow. Okay, so your best bet is actually, because it's so funny, because I saw like a bunch of tour companies and I'm like, do I do that? Because like that's the thing that I'm always like hesitant to do in the US, because they always go to like the same wineries, right? Or you don't get that same experience because in the US I could just email a winery and be like, "Hey, can I
Yeah.
come visit?" But it sounds like in Burgundy that's the way to go to hire somebody who can take you through this tour. And then also you said emailing the negotiants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like Jadot, Boisset, Bouchard all have really good touring facilities. Champy is definitely so Maison Champy. It's in Beaune. It is the oldest continuously functioning winery in Burgundy. They have an amazing like wine tourism thing. Their fermentation room was built by Eiffel.
Dang.
So Eiffel Tower, Eiffel built their fermentation room.
Is that what am I thinking the right thing? I was like, I don't want
Yeah.
to sound silly, but that's what it made me think. Okay.
Because Eiffel was from Burgundy. So he was a Burgundian.
Nice. I'm so excited now. Okay, and then do you recommend like in terms of where to stay is like Beaune the place to go?
I would stay in Beaune, especially if you're going just for if you're going there for wine, go to Beaune. Dijon, I love Dijon. It is this really cool old medieval city, but you have to drive a lot, or you got to
Sure.
take the train to be able to get. And if you're in Beaune, you're in the middle of the vineyards. You have quick jump ups to any place that's around.
Perfect. Okay, I'm glad I asked. That was perfect. I'm like, now I know what to do for my planning. Okay.
Yep.
For folks that want to learn more about Burgundy, do you have any resources you'd recommend?
I mean, Jasper Morris Inside Burgundy, if you feel like reading a 5,000 page book.
Have you read the book? Did you enjoy it? Is it a good resource book?
Oh, it's an amazing resource. Clive Coates' Wines of Burgundy is also an exquisite. These are both masters of wine who have devoted themselves to studying Burgundy. Just doing French Wine Scholar really gives you kind of like first grasp that you need on what's going on in Burgundy. And then there's a couple of like little small guidebooks on the Cote d'Or that you can find on Amazon. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but just like Cote d'Or and their little like breakdowns of what's going on with these wine villages, that kind of stuff.
And then obviously we'll plug your Instagram over at Drinks with Alex Lopez. I know you kind of finished up your Burgundy education source, but even just going back and looking through all of that, I'm sure folks can learn a lot. And I'm sure you'll talk about Burgundy again on there.
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna be doing at least for the next year. I'm doing an appellation every week, and every month I'm gonna do a different Burgundy appellation.
Oh, perfect. Well, yeah, go follow him on Instagram at Drinks with Alex Lopez, and I'll have it in the show notes as well. But all right, we've made it to the last bit of the interview, and we're going back to just about you. These don't have to be Burgundy related, but this is what I call my speed round. And basically, just don't think about the answers too much. Otherwise, you might be thinking for too long, essentially. Like the first thing that comes to mind is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your favorite wine at the moment?
So my favorite wine at the moment, I've been drinking a lot of Chablis
Uh-huh.
and a lot of Montagny. So basically the bookending Chardonnay regions of Burgundy. Been drinking a ton of Chardonnay.
Nice. Okay, how about a favorite wine region that you've ever visited?
The Moselle Valley was amazing to visit, and Alsace. Alsace, both of the Riesling producing regions are just so picturesque and amazing and so cute.
Oh my gosh, that makes me, oh, it makes it even harder. When I'm going to France, I'm planning on doing Loire, Burgundy, and Jura, but a part of me really wants to go to Alsace, but I just don't know if I have time.
It's like it is going to Beauty and the Beast.
All right, maybe we'll see. We gotta see if there's time. Okay, how about a wine region you'd like to visit that you haven't visited yet?
Anywhere in Australia, I'd really like to go to like the Barossa Valley, Adelaide Hills, and then also New Zealand, Marlborough and Central Otago.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do one of those, you got to do the other while you're there. Okay, how about a favorite wine and food pairing?
So my favorite wine to pair with food is just sherry in general. So sherry, there's so many different styles of sherry that I could talk about it for like 3 hours, but sherry is the perfect food wine, period. You can have it with your appetizers, you can have it with your desserts. It goes across all spectrums of everything, and I can talk about it forever, and I love it so much.
Dang, I definitely need to have a sherry episode on the podcast. We did it in my in the Court Crew virtual tasting club and learned a little bit about sherry, but there's so much. And then we did a full tasting. And I bought one of those like 6 packs where it's like the different styles and it's
Yeah.
amazing all the different like you said styles and like it definitely sherry's one of those that like the sweet version I like easily love. It's great. It's rich. It's not like it's like syrupy in the best way. I say that and I'm sure it like turns some people away, but it's delicious. The dry versions take a second. They're definitely different, but I hear what you're saying as well, where like anytime I had a little bit of food with it, it was like, whoa, what is that? What is happening?
Yeah. Yeah, they're funky wines for sure.
Yeah, I think funky is a great term. Okay. Last question. How about people wanting to get into wine but don't have a lot of money to spend on a bottle? What would you say is like, it doesn't have to be a specific bottle, it can be like a style as well. Best bottle of wine under $15.
I have been just moving through Loire Valley Cabernet Franc like caseloads recently, and they're all around 15, $16 on places like Burgundy and Chinon. You can get some really great value Cab Franc or Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley. The Loire Valley is awesome for value.
I agree. They have some great wine at some great price. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for joining and for sharing all your knowledge on Burgundy. It's always nice to get to hear from an expert and, you know, all that on a very difficult wine region. I feel like that was a great little intro for folks
Thank
listening
you.
in.
Yeah, it was a genuine pleasure. Now I just got to wait for my test results to get back.
Yes, yeah, we've all got our fingers crossed and wishing the best for you.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great rest of your evening, Alex. Cheers.
Thank you. You as well.
Doesn't Burgundy just sound wonderful? I cannot wait to visit in September and tell you all about it once I'm back. And how about Alex? If you haven't already, be sure to follow him on Instagram. His handle is at Drinks with Alex Lopez. If you loved this episode as much as I did, I would so appreciate it if you take a quick second to rate it and leave a review. And if you know a wine lover in your life that would enjoy this, please share it with them. It would mean the world to me. In next week's episode, I'll be doing a topic that was asked for by one of my Court Crew members. I'll be sharing some up-and-coming wine regions that I think you should have your eye on. Thanks again for listening, and as a thank you, I'd like to share my free shopping guide, 15 Wines Under $15. Simply head to my website, corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and join the mailing list. Cheers!